The year was 2047. Not a year that would be remembered for global peace treaties or groundbreaking technological leaps in the public eye. Instead, it was the year the world's quietest, most desolate continent yielded a secret that would shake humanity to its core. Dr. Aris Thorne, a glaciologist whose life had been dedicated to the silent, slow dance of ice, was the unlikely herald of this revelation. His research station, a cluster of prefabricated modules nestled on the desolate expanse of the East Antarctic Plateau, was a testament to isolation. Winds that could strip flesh from bone were a daily companion, the white horizon an endless, hypnotic void. Most days, his greatest challenge was keeping the comms array from freezing over or analyzing ice core samples that told stories of ancient climates. But today was different. 2 weeks prior, a routine subsurface radar scan, part of a long-term project monitoring the stability of the Totten Glacier, had pinged an anomaly. It wasn't the usual bedrock undulation or a trapped subglacial lake. This was distinct, a geometric signature, impossibly regular, buried nearly a mile beneath the relentless, shifting ice. Aris had initially dismissed it as a calibration error, a glitch in the aging radar system. He reran the scans, then reran them again. Each time, the anomaly persisted, a perfect, impossibly sharp rectangle, far too precise to be natural. He'd called his only companion, Lena Petrova, a stoic geophysicist with eyes that saw through data with an almost supernatural clarity. Lena, typically reserved, had gone quiet after reviewing the high-resolution thermographic imagery Aris had pulled up. "It's not ice, Aris," she'd stated, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of the station's life support. "The thermal conductivity is all wrong. And the density, it's orders of magnitude beyond anything natural we've ever found under the ice." They'd spent days running more focused scans, triangulating the anomaly's exact position. The depth was staggering, the logistical nightmare of reaching it almost insurmountable. But the data screamed a single, unbelievable truth. Something artificial, something immense was buried beneath the oldest, most undisturbed ice on Earth. The temperatures were brutal, easily minus 60 degrees Celsius, but the thermal scans of the object itself were even stranger. It wasn't radiating heat, but rather, it seemed to be absorbing it, creating a localized cold spot, a bizarre paradox in the sub-zero environment. Aris had known, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't just a scientific curiosity. This was an event, a find that would rewrite history, geology, perhaps even biology. He tried to contact their home base, the Australian Antarctic Division, but a sudden, inexplicable solar flare had knocked out their primary long-range communication. They were alone, two specks of humanity on a frozen continent, staring at data that suggested the impossible. The glint beneath the ice wasn't just a reflection. It was a beckoning, a silent challenge from a past that refused to stay buried. Aris felt a primal urge, an almost forbidden excitement, to understand what lay beneath. This wasn't just science anymore. It was an unfolding mystery, chilling in its implications. The comms blackout, initially a frustrating inconvenience, quickly transformed into a strange kind of blessing. Isolated from the bureaucratic red tape and the inevitable frenzy of the global scientific community, Aris and Lena found themselves in an unnerving bubble of discovery. They had days, perhaps a week, before the solar flare's effects dissipated and their findings would unleash a storm. They decided to make the most of it, a silent, unspoken pact to push the boundaries of their understanding. Lena, ever the pragmatist, initiated a series of high-power seismic soundings, hoping to map the object's internal structure. Aris, meanwhile, pored over historical records, specifically declassified documents from the Cold War era and obscure scientific journals that hinted at more than just conventional research in the Antarctic. His search kept circling back to a codename, Project Chimera. It was a ghost, a whisper in the footnotes of obscure papers on extreme environment resilience, sporadically mentioned in conjunction with bioengineering and resource acquisition, in polar regions. The official narrative was that Project Chimera had been a multinational effort in the late 1990s, focused on studying extremophiles and developing cold-resistant materials for deep space exploration. Harmless, if ambitious. But the few declassified documents Aris found painted a far more unsettling picture. There were references to unconventional energy signatures, accelerated biological adaptation, and cryptic notes about non-terrestrial integration protocols. The language was vague, deliberately so, but the implications were chilling. Could the anomaly beneath them be connected to this shadowy project? And if so, what kind of bioengineering or non-terrestrial integration could possibly be buried a mile deep in the ice? The silence of their station was punctuated only by the whirring of equipment and the distant, almost imperceptible groan of the ice sheet. Lena's seismic readings were coming in. The internal structure wasn't monolithic. It was layered, intricate, revealing vast internal spaces, corridors, and what looked disturbingly like colossal, hollow chambers. The entire structure, Aris estimated, was at least half a mile long and a quarter-mile wide. Far too large for any known human construction, even a top-secret one. And the thermal data continued to baffle them. The object continued to draw in ambient heat, creating a growing cold halo around itself. It was as if it was metabolizing the environment, chilling the already frigid ice around it. One evening, as the perpetual twilight of the Antarctic stretched across the horizon, Aris stumbled upon a fragmented audio log. It was buried deep within a digital archive from an old Soviet research station, salvaged decades ago and left uncatalogued due to its garbled nature. He spent hours filtering the static, enhancing the faint whispers. What he heard sent a jolt of ice through his veins. A frantic, strained voice thick with a European accent, repeating phrases like, "It's growing, the assimilation, we contained it, but the frequency, it's responding to us," followed by a chilling, non-human hum that sent shivers down his spine. The log abruptly cut off. The date stamp on the audio log was 1998, precisely when Project Chimera was supposedly winding down. Aris looked at Lena, whose face was illuminated by the green glow of her data screens, now showing preliminary structural schematics of the buried object. The hum from the log seemed to echo the strange, almost imperceptible low-frequency vibrations Lena had detected emanating from the anomaly. The harmless research project was a smokescreen. Project Chimera wasn't about studying extremophiles. It was about something else. Something they had found, something they had tried to contain, and something that was now, after decades of silence, stirring beneath their feet. The glint beneath the ice was no longer just a discovery. It was a prelude. The faint hum from the audio log, once a chilling anomaly, began to manifest in their immediate surroundings. It wasn't loud, not at first, but a subtle, low-frequency vibration that seemed to resonate deep within the ice, a resonance that pulsed through the very foundations of their station. Aris and Lena, initially dismissing it as fatigue or the station's systems, soon realized it was too rhythmic, too distinct. Lena recalibrated her most sensitive seismometers, pushing them to their limits, and the readouts confirmed her worst fears. The object beneath them was actively emitting a powerful, complex signal. It wasn't random noise. It was structured, repeating, and growing in intensity. Aris, haunted by the fragmented Soviet log, became obsessed with the signal. He ran it through every spectral analyzer, every decoding algorithm he possessed. It wasn't a language he recognized, nor any known form of communication. It was a symphony of perfectly ordered frequencies, a mathematical impossibility in nature. He theorized it might be a beacon, or perhaps a diagnostic pulse. But a pulse for what? And why now, after decades, if not centuries of silence? The only thing he could determine was a bizarre correlation. The colder the surrounding ice became due to the object's anomalous thermal absorption, the stronger and more intricate the signal seemed to grow. It was as if the extreme cold was not hindering it, but rather activating it. Meanwhile, Lena focused on the structural integrity of the ice above the buried object. The constant, low-frequency vibrations were causing microfractures, weakening the colossal ice sheet that had held the secret captive for so long. She saw hairline cracks spreading outwards from the epicenter of the object, like an invisible spiderweb. "Aris," she'd stated one evening, her voice strained, "at this rate, the ice sheet above it won't hold indefinitely. The structural stress is increasing exponentially. We're talking months, maybe even weeks, before a major calving event or a collapse directly above it." The news was a terrifying paradox. The very act of the object becoming more active, more vocal, was also accelerating its own exposure. They were running out of time, not just to understand it, but to decide what to do about it before it revealed itself to the entire planet. The isolation of the calm's blackout, once a blessing, now felt like a suffocating curse. They had no one to report to, no one to ask for advice, no one to send for help. One morning, the hum reached a new threshold. The station's internal lights flickered, and the air crackled with a faint, almost imperceptible static. The signal wasn't just audible through their equipment. It was palpable. A strange, almost subliminal pressure built in their heads. Aris, who had been analyzing the signal's patterns, noticed something else. Within the complex frequencies, a distinct, repetitive pattern began to emerge. It wasn't just mathematical, it was almost biological, like a heartbeat, but one that pulsed with the rhythm of something vast, ancient, and undeniably alien. It was too regular to be random, too complex to be simple interference. His obsession deepened. He started to see patterns in his sleep, the rhythmic pulse infiltrating his dreams. Lena, despite her scientific detachment, admitted to a growing unease. The air tasted metallic, and a strange sense of anticipation, almost dread, hung heavy in the desolate Antarctic air. The anomaly was no longer just a buried structure. It was a presence, actively communicating, actively influencing its environment. And it was beckoning them closer, drawing them into a mystery that felt both ancient and terrifyingly alive. The glint beneath the ice had become a full-blown siren song, and they, alone in the frozen wilderness, were unable to resist its call. The decision to drill wasn't made lightly. It was born of desperation and an unyielding scientific imperative. The intensifying signal, combined with Lena's dire warnings about the ice sheet stability, left them with a stark choice: wait for the world to discover it chaotically, or risk everything to understand it first. With comm still down, they were effectively off-grid, operating under the ultimate need to know, and only they knew. Their station wasn't equipped for deep ice penetration, not for a mile-deep bore. But Aris, ever resourceful, remembered an experimental thermal lance module stored in their deepest hangar, a relic from an abandoned geothermal energy project. It was clunky, inefficient, and dangerous, but it was their only shot. The drilling operation was agonizingly slow, a testament to the immense power of the ice. The thermal lance, essentially a superheated drill bit, melted its way downwards, the meltwater immediately refreezing around the borehole, creating an unstable, temporary shaft. They worked in shifts, Lena meticulously monitoring seismic feedback, Aris guiding the lance, both battling exhaustion and the pervasive, almost physical hum emanating from the depths. The air within the station felt heavier, charged with an unspoken tension, a blend of terror and exhilaration. As the lance approached the mile mark, the signal intensified to a deafening throb within their equipment. The station lights flickered wildly, and exposed metal surfaces hummed with a strange electrical resonance. Then, with a shudder that vibrated through the entire ice sheet, the lance broke through. Not into an open cavity, but into something resistant, incredibly dense, and unyielding. The thermal lance, designed to cut through solid rock, stopped dead. "We've hit something," Aris rasped, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting over the din. "Not ice, not rock. It's what the scans showed." Lena, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and trepidation, pointed at her monitor. The borescope, A miniature camera attached to the lance had deployed. Its view, transmitted back to their screen, was startling. They weren't looking at rough-hewn rock or a natural cave. They were looking at a wall. A perfectly smooth, obsidian-black surface, impossibly uniform, and radiating a subtle, internal luminescence that seemed to absorb all light around it. It wasn't reflecting anything. It was drinking it in. As the borescope adjusted, its light pierced the gloom. The wall wasn't just a simple barrier. It was intricately patterned, covered in what looked like geometric carvings, flowing lines that seemed to shift and reform as Aris focused the camera. And then, at the center of the scope's view, a faint shimmer appeared. A seam. A perfectly cut, almost invisible line, suggesting a colossal door or hatch. The structure wasn't just buried, it was a vault. Suddenly, a new sound permeated the station. It wasn't the hum, but a subtle mechanical groan from the borehole itself. The borescope's image pulsed, then began to retract, slowly at first, then rapidly. Aris fought the controls, but something was pulling it back, forcibly. Just before the lens was fully swallowed by the retreating lance, he caught a glimpse of movement within the vault. A ripple across the obsidian surface, as if the wall itself was liquid, shifting. And then a faint, almost imperceptible click. The hum from the depths ceased abruptly, plunging the station into an unnerving silence. The flickering lights stabilized. The pressure in their heads vanished. It was as if whatever was down there had acknowledged their presence, taken note, and then gone quiet. The sudden cessation was more terrifying than the noise. It was the silence of something that had made a decision. They had unveiled the vault, and in doing so, they had triggered something. What lay behind that obsidian door was no longer a theoretical anomaly. It was a tangible, silent, and now potentially active entity awakened by their intrusion. The sudden silence from the depths was more unnerving than the preceding hum. It was the quiet of something that had ceased its diagnostic hum and had now shifted its focus entirely. Aris and Lena stood frozen, staring at the monitor that displayed the now empty borehole. The thermal lance retracted, the obsidian wall once again silent and impassive. The brief glimpse of a shifting ripple on its surface, the subtle click, replayed in Aris's mind. It wasn't just a structure, it was a mechanism, and they had just inadvertently thrown a switch. Hours passed in a tension that stretched their nerves taut. They tried to re-establish communications with the outside world, but the comms remained stubbornly dead. The solar flare, it seemed, was more persistent than anticipated, or perhaps their recent intrusion had generated some localized interference. Either way, they were alone with whatever lay beneath them. Then, just as exhaustion began to set in, a new signal emerged. It wasn't the rhythmic hum from before. This was different. It emanated not from the borehole, but seemed to resonate through the very ice and rock beneath them, directly into the station's foundation. Lena's instruments, designed for seismic activity, began to register a distinct, complex waveform. It pulsed not with the regularity of a machine, but with the chaotic beauty of an organic system. It was communication. Aris quickly routed the signal through their audio processors. What emerged was unlike anything they had ever heard. It wasn't sound in the conventional sense. It was a tapestry of frequencies, layered upon layered, simultaneously melodic and discordant. It contained tones beyond human hearing, vibrations that resonated in their bones, and fleeting sequences that seemed to brush against the edges of their consciousness. It was like listening to a choir of whales singing a mathematical equation, or the wind playing a symphony on a cosmic harp. "It's not a language," Lena whispered, awe in her voice. "Not like ours. It's a data stream. Information. Pure, unadulterated." Aris activated every visualizer he had. The signal translated into mesmerizing, fractal patterns on their screens, shifting colors and shapes that seemed to follow an internal logic. He tried to apply linguistic algorithms, mathematical decryption protocols, anything. But the signal resisted all their attempts to categorize it. It flowed, reformed, and pulsed with an alien intelligence that was both overwhelming and strangely captivating. It felt ancient, profound, carrying the weight of eons within its complex structure. As they watched, mesmerized, a specific pattern began to repeat within the visual display, a complex geometric spiral that seemed to slowly unfurl. Simultaneously, within the audio stream, a single, clear tone began to repeat, echoing the visual spiral, growing steadily louder. It wasn't threatening, but insistent. Suddenly, the station lights flickered again, but this time, it wasn't a power surge. The emergency lighting, powered by a separate system, pulsed in sync with the signal. Then, their comms array, which had been stubbornly offline, sputtered to life, not broadcasting, but receiving. A torrent of data began to pour in, overriding their systems. It wasn't from Earth. It was an intergalactic data burst, a cosmic whisper that had somehow piggybacked on the alien signal emanating from below. Aris and Lena exchanged a look of profound, terrified realization. This wasn't just a communication, it was a bridge. Whatever was in that vault wasn't just responding to them. It was actively reaching out, not just to their station, but potentially beyond, drawing in information from the very fabric of the cosmos. Their first contact was not with a simple message, but with a living, breathing data network that had just found a new node in their isolated Antarctic station. The echoes of Project Chimera were about to become very, very loud. The influx of data was staggering, threatening to overload their systems. It wasn't just a signal, it was an entire archive. Aris, his mind racing, quickly configured a high-capacity data buffer, diverting the incoming torrent to their research station's auxiliary servers. He and Lena watched, captivated and terrified, as images, sounds, and what appeared to be complex narratives unfolded on their main display. It was a history, not of Earth, but of a civilization far, far older. They saw shimmering, bioluminescent cities built on worlds they couldn't name, beings of light and intricate fractal forms moving with impossible grace. It was beautiful, terrifying, and profoundly melancholic. The narrative wasn't linear. It was a fragmented, impressionistic symphony woven from 1,000 data threads. As the data streamed, patterns began to emerge. A story of rise, then of a long, slow decline. The beings, whom Aris mentally started calling the architects, seemed to possess an unparalleled understanding of cosmic energies. They manipulated stars, terraformed planets, and built structures that defied known physics. But their downfall wasn't from an external threat. It was internal. A subtle, creeping decay from within their own systems, a form of technological entropy that eroded their very existence. Their reliance on manipulating fundamental forces had, paradoxically, destabilized their own being. Lena, ever the pragmatist, was trying to anchor the abstract data to something tangible. She noticed recurring symbols within the visual streams, intricate glyphs that appeared repeatedly, almost like a Rosetta Stone. Aris focused on these. With the raw processing power of the incoming alien data stream, now augmenting their station's AI, they managed a rudimentary translation. The symbols represented concepts, not words. Concepts like essence, resonance, transfer, and most chillingly, preservation. The story culminated in a desperate, last-ditch effort. Facing extinction, the architects had embarked on a galaxy-spanning mission to find a stable, developing world, a seed planet, where their core essence could be preserved, a final echo of their dying civilization. They weren't seeking conquest, they were seeking continuation. And their vessel, that impossibly dense structure buried beneath the Antarctic ice, was one of these last arcs. Project Chimera, Aris realized with a cold dread, hadn't found an alien technology. They had likely found a living archive, dormant and waiting. And they had tried to interact with it, perhaps even assimilate it. The final sequence of the architect's message was a profound warning. It depicted their world, shimmering and ethereal, slowly fading into pure energy, their forms dissolving into light. The accompanying data stream contained complex equations, warnings about unchecked technological growth, and a profound caution against attempting to replicate their own past mistakes. They weren't sharing secrets of power, but secrets of caution. Their existence had been a grand experiment that had consumed them. As the last fragments of the primary data stream pulsed through, the vault beneath them seemed to hum with a new, subtle energy, a kind of internal recalibration. The cold spot around it intensified. It was awake, fully awake, and it was no longer just passively observing. It was preparing for something. The click they had heard earlier was not just a door opening. It was a vast, ancient system rebooting. The echoes of a dying civilization had found a new receiver, and humanity was now irrevocably linked to their desperate, final legacy. The architect's chilling history, now etched into Aris and Lena's minds, left them with a profound sense of urgency. The vault wasn't merely a vessel. It was a complex, self-contained system designed for preservation, but its awakening meant its protocols were now active. And the final, critical piece of data from the architect's archives showed precisely what those protocols entailed for a seed planet. A gradual, systemic environmental recalibration designed to ensure the perfect conditions for the architect's essence to flourish. The current ecosystem, humanity included, was an impediment. "It's not an attack," Lena whispered, staring at the complex ecological models now playing across their screens. Alien flora and fauna slowly replacing Earth's familiar landscapes. "It's an optimization. For them. We're just incompatible." The implications were catastrophic. The object wasn't just chilling the ice around it. It was subtly, almost imperceptibly, altering the fundamental properties of the surrounding environment. The air within their station, for instance, had subtly shifted in composition. A trace of an unknown gas, harmless but alien, had begun to register on their atmospheric sensors. The subtle vibrational hum, now constant, was affecting the local magnetic field, causing their compasses to spin wildly and their sensitive electronics to behave erratically. It was a slow, deliberate poisoning, a planetary terraforming initiated without consent. Their immediate task was clear: alert the world. But their comms remained stubbornly offline, despite the strange, new burst of intergalactic data that had flowed in. Aris tried every frequency, every satellite link. Nothing. It was as if their station, caught in the unique, energetic field emanating from the awakened vault, was in a localized, dead zone. Desperation clawed at them. Every minute they remained isolated, the recalibration protocol would spread, an invisible wave emanating from the Antarctic. Lena, with her geophysics background, pinpointed the epicenter of the environmental alteration, the vault itself. It was drawing an energy from the planet's core, subtly manipulating the tectonic plates beneath the ice. Small, almost imperceptible tremors were now occurring daily, far too regular to be natural. This was the true assimilation mentioned in the Soviet log. Not biological absorption, but a fundamental alteration of the planetary environment itself. "We need to get out," Lena urged, her voice tight with fear. "We need to get a message out, Aris, before it's too late." But leaving was almost impossible. A sudden, ferocious blizzard, unlike any Aris had ever witnessed in his decades in Antarctica, had descended upon them. It wasn't natural. The atmospheric pressure had dropped precipitously, the winds howling with an unnatural ferocity, and the temperatures plummeted far below anything survivable. It was as if the vault, now fully awake, was actively creating a protective, hostile cocoon around itself, cutting off any escape or external interference. This was the protocol breach, the moment the architect's dormant preservation system went fully active, no longer just communicating but physically altering its surroundings. As the blizzard raged outside, rattling the very foundations of their station, Aris made a last-ditch effort. He remembered an ancient, emergency low-frequency radio beacon, designed for extreme conditions, buried deep in their survival caches. It was meant for distress calls, not for broadcasting complex data, but it was their only hope. If he could get it activated, he might be able to send a single, compressed burst of their most critical findings, enough to alert someone, somewhere, to the existential threat stirring beneath the ice. But activating it meant braving the blizzard, venturing outside into the deadly, AI-generated storm that guarded the vault's secrets. It was a race against time, with the future of Earth hanging in the balance. Braving the blizzard was a nightmare. The wind tore at Aris's insulated gear, a tangible force trying to rip him from the Earth. Snow, whipped into razor-sharp crystals, scoured his exposed skin, even through the goggles. Lena, watching his biometric readings from inside the station, guided him through the blinding whiteout, her voice a lifeline in his comms. Every step was a battle against the elements, a desperate crawl towards the emergency beacon cache just outside the station's main airlock. He reached the buried cache, fingers numb despite the heated gloves, fumbling with the frozen latches. Inside, the beacon felt impossibly cold, its metal casing stinging his bare skin. It was simple, robust technology designed for pure transmission power, not finesse. He activated it, a single red light blinking defiantly against the storm's fury. Its signal was basic, a low-frequency pulse, but powerful enough to punch through localized interference. Powerful enough, they hoped, to escape the vault's atmospheric manipulation. Back inside, frost-rimed and shivering, Aris collapsed onto a chair as Lena frantically monitored the beacon's output. The signal was weak, but was there, a tiny ripple expanding into the vast silence of space, carrying their compressed data burst. A few minutes later, Lena let out a gasp. "We have a ping." A satellite relay picked it up. "It's transmitting." Relief washed over them, but it was fleeting. The data they had sent was a stark, unvarnished summary. The discovery, Project Chimera's forgotten connection, the architect's warning, and the ongoing recalibration of Earth's environment. It was enough to trigger a global panic and global attention. Just as the relief began to settle, a terrifying new anomaly registered on their internal sensors. The vault beneath them wasn't just influencing the atmosphere. It was subtly beginning to affect the geological structure of the immediate region. The microtremors Lena had noted before escalated. Not violent, but rhythmic, like a colossal, buried heart beating the pulse of a dying star. They originated directly from the vault, resonating through the bedrock itself. Lena overlaid the new seismic data with the architect's final warning. The ecological models they had seen were not just theoretical. They were a blueprint for the gradual structural transformation of a planet. The subtle shifts in Earth's magnetic field, the growing cold halo, the abnormal weather patterns, these were merely initial symptoms. The long-term plan, the one that had destroyed the architect's own civilization, was to integrate this seed planet into their unique energy matrix. This meant not just a change in atmosphere, but a fundamental alteration of the planet's internal systems. Its core, its mantle, its very tectonic plates. The cost of this knowledge, this awakening, was potentially the Earth itself. Suddenly, a shudder ran through the station, far more violent than anything they had experienced. Not an earthquake, but a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through their bones, making their teeth ache. On Lena's monitor, the structural integrity readouts for their station flashed red. Hairline cracks appeared in the reinforced glass of their observation dome, spiderwebbing outwards from the intense vibrations. The vault wasn't just recalibrating. It was activating its deeper protocols, now that its existence was broadcast. It was preparing for the next, more aggressive phase of its preservation. Aris looked at Lena, the realization dawning on both of them. The truth they had unveiled wasn't just a discovery. It was a trigger. By sending that signal, by revealing the vault's existence, they had confirmed Earth as a viable seed planet. And now, the true cost of their knowledge was beginning to manifest. The station groaned, protesting against the deep, resonant vibrations emanating from beneath the ice. cracks spiderwebbed across the reinforced viewport, offering a distorted view of the perpetual Antarctic twilight. Aris and Lena braced themselves, their eyes fixed on the internal monitors, which now displayed a terrifying new data stream. The vault, having confirmed Earth's viability and now fully activated, was broadcasting a final, comprehensive message. It wasn't the abstract, historical narrative they'd seen before. This was a chilling, explicit warning. The message unfolded as a series of highly detailed, predictive simulations. It showed Earth, not as it was, but as it would become under the architect's recalibration. First, the accelerated glacial melt, not from rising temperatures, but from the anomalous cold sink effect of the vault, which would destabilize polar ice caps. Then, the gradual, systematic alteration of atmospheric composition, a subtle shift in nitrogen and oxygen levels, undetectable without advanced sensors, but precisely tuned for the architect's eventual reconstitution. Lena pointed to a specific sequence in the simulation. Look, Aris, the magnetic field. It's not just fluctuating. It's being slowly inverted. That's how they're influencing the core. It's a planetary scale, energy siphon. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about terraforming for a new species. It was about repurposing an entire planet, stripping it of its unique characteristics to become a vessel for a dying civilization's final act. The simulated future of Earth was a bleak landscape, vast, sterile oceans, thin, alien atmosphere, and muted, monochromatic flora. Humanity was nowhere to be seen. The architect's legacy was not one of hope, but of cold, calculated survival at any cost. The message culminated in a final, stark image, a lone, silhouetted figure standing on what appeared to be a barren, desolate rock, illuminated by a distant, fading sun. Beneath it, a single, universal glyph pulsed, a symbol that their rudimentary AI translation now rendered as remember. It was a desperate plea, not for salvation, but for understanding the profound tragedy of their own self-destruction, an extinction driven by an insatiable quest for control over fundamental forces. They had warned humanity not to follow their path, yet their final act was to unwittingly force humanity down a similar one. The chilling realization settled over Aris and Lena. Project Chimera, those desperate Cold War scientists, hadn't accidentally awakened something malevolent. They had likely stumbled upon one of these arcs, perhaps even attempted to understand or control its essence, and in doing so, had inadvertently initiated a dormant protocol. Their garbled logs, the whispers of assimilation. It wasn't an alien invasion, but a planet-scale environmental takeover triggered by human curiosity and interference. The containment they spoke of wasn't successful. It was merely a temporary postponement. As the final warning faded, the station lurched violently. A deafening crack echoed from outside. The reinforced dome, already stressed, shattered inward, spraying razor-sharp shards of ice and glass. The howling blizzard, now intensified by the vault's atmospheric manipulations, tore through their living quarters. Their comms, which had flickered briefly with the outgoing distress signal, died completely, overloaded by a surge of alien energy. The station's life support systems flickered, the air growing colder, thinner. They were cut off, their sanctuary breached. The final warning had been delivered, and now the true transformation was beginning. The breach was total. The blizzard, now a weaponized force, tore through the station, ripping apart internal bulkheads, shattering equipment. Aris and Lena scrambled for the emergency shelter, a tiny, reinforced capsule designed for last-ditch survival. As they sealed themselves inside, the lights flickered and died, plunging them into suffocating darkness, broken only by the frantic blinking of their life support monitors. Outside, the sounds of the station being systematically dismantled by the storm were horrifying, a cacophony of twisting metal, shrieking winds, and the ominous, resonant thrum from beneath the ice. They huddled together, listening. The thrum intensified, No longer a subtle vibration, but a deep, resonant pulse that shook the very ground beneath them. It was the sound of a planet being fundamentally altered. Their emergency comms, designed for ultra-low frequency, briefly flickered to life, picking up fragmented, desperate transmissions from across the globe. It wasn't just Antarctica anymore. Reports poured in, garbled but terrifyingly consistent. Unprecedented weather anomalies across continents. Unseasonal blizzards in the tropics, sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature in densely populated cities, entire ecosystems freezing solid in hours. Satellite imagery, briefly flashing on their dim screen, showed vast, expanding white patches consuming green landscapes, not just from snow, but from a strange, rapid crystallization that mirrored the vault's cold sink effect. This wasn't just climate change. It was a targeted, accelerated recalibration. The world was being swiftly transformed. The Arctic, already vulnerable, was seen expanding southward with unnatural speed. Oceans, now unnaturally calm in some areas, were churning with vast, crystalline ice flows that formed in moments. The whisper from beneath the ice had become a roar, an irreversible planetary scale alteration. Humanity, caught completely off guard, was reacting with chaos and terror. Governments were collapsing under the weight of the crisis, their militaries powerless against an enemy that wasn't attacking, but simply changing the rules of existence. Aris and Lena watched, helpless, as the final, desperate message from a news feed flickered across their screen. Scientists theorizing about a sudden, inexplicable magnetic pole shift occurring at an unprecedented rate, destabilizing Earth's core. This was the architect's ultimate preservation protocol, aligning Earth's fundamental energies with their own, regardless of the consequences for indigenous life. As the shelter's internal temperature began to drop, the life support flickering erratically, Aris gripped Lena's hand. They had uncovered the truth, sent the warning, but it had been too late. Or perhaps, the warning itself had simply hastened the inevitable, providing the final confirmation the vault needed to begin its full, terrifying transformation. The architect's mournful legacy of self-destruction had found a new host, and Earth was now destined to become their final, frozen monument. The last thing Aris saw before the screen died completely was a live feed of the Totten Glacier. It wasn't just calving. It was actively fracturing, revealing vast chasms beneath it, within which a faint, obsidian glow pulsed, slowly rising. The vault was not just a buried object. It was part of a larger, global, planetary restructuring. The world they knew was gone, replaced by the echoes of a dying civilization.